Welcome to Elevating la Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share their passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. This is season 3, focused on education. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hola, I'm Karina, host of Elevating la Cultura, and today I'm talking with Lisset from Casita Montessori. I get so excited to hear stories of people who are pouring back into their communities, which is exactly what she is doing by opening this school. I love learning about Montessori education and why it's so important for her to bring this type of access to the south side of Chicago. So please enjoy our conversation. Hi, I am so excited to introduce my next guest. I met Liz right now, like officially as we're recording this podcast, but I have been following her and her mission for a while now, and I feel like our paths just were bound to cross. And so I'm so glad that I'm able to speak with her today. She is building an amazing school, Casita Montessori, and I'm so excited for her to share all what that means and all what that is for her and her community. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself officially.
Hi, thank you so much, Karina. So yeah, I'm opening a Montessori preschool. Um, it's been a really long process, so I'll get into that. Basically, and I think like my childhood, a lot of it goes into why I started doing this. So I was born in Little Village and lived there until I was about 5 years old. Then we moved to Gage Park, which, if you're familiar with Gage Park in the 90s, um, it was changing. You know, the demographics were changing. And then I attended the Catholic school in the area, and even though the student population changed, the school did not change with it. So we were not allowed to like practice anything from our culture. We weren't even allowed to speak Spanish in school in the 90s, and like yeah. So I think that affected me a lot, and I did a lot of identity exploration when I hit like my teen years. And when I went to high school, I went to Curie, and it's a public school, and it was like everyone was so openly Mexican. I felt like I was never allowed to be that, so I was like, oh my god, they're so weird. Um, and that just it's something I that just kind of stuck with me this entire time, and I feel like our children need a place where they can, you know, be within their culture openly. Um, so it's like so many different aspects that go into this. So like our children definitely need to have that identity formation early on. Um, so I feel like I've done a lot of research into this. I I also wanted to be a psychologist when I was really young, and I went to college and I majored in psychology, but I always focused on children, small children, and a lot of my research in college was on acculturation and um, bilingualism and how does this affect the outcomes of the children of Latino immigrants. So all of this, I feel like all of this just played a role in coming to terms with the need for not just a Montessori school, not just a preschool, but also a school that serves um, children that are forming their identity. They're in a different country from their parents, or even if they're second, third generation. How does identity play a role? And even though they're small, like that plays a huge impact on why, you know, some children don't do as well in school as others. So, it's so many things. And I never knew I was going to be on this journey either. So, I was an AmeriCorps member in college, and the program was Jumpstart, which I served in a nonprofit here in Chicago. I was paired with a little child, which I still remember. I found the picture recently, and I was like, oh my god, I wonder what he's up to now. But that really, I feel like that played a huge role in also my decision in changing from psychology to education, even though I was already at the end of college. I was basically almost done. But seeing how the classrooms um, weren't necessarily safe for the children, not saying that they were not, that they were being threatened or that they were in danger, but that the way the teachers speak to them was not a way that children should be spoken to. Um, like the children were not learning necessarily, but they were more like being pacified. So they were disciplined to be quiet and play. And children, that's how children learn. They play, but how much can they actually learn when they're scared of the teachers rather than being, having that natural curiosity where they ask questions. Like how can they form that relationship with the teacher to learn when they're being they're being yelled at across the room. So that really impacted me, and I felt like I visited a lot of classrooms. Um, like coincidentally, I also did other work in like policy, in education and early childhood education, which had me also visiting classrooms throughout the city. And I just always felt like our early childhood education system as a whole is not providing what it should be providing. There's a disconnect between funding that plays an impact in how programs, how they work. So there's like city funding, then there's state funding, and then federal funding, and it's just not connected. So I think a lot of us have heard now, CPS has like one application for all early childhood programs. So that's kind of a response to some of that work that was done by a lot of parents pushed for early, like more than 10 years ago. Um, but there's still, you can't really find like the right program for you because, what I'm saying right now, like, there's just, so if you're searching for like an early childhood space, I still feel like there's not like a system for parents to be like matched with what is ideal for them. Um, and then, like as a parent, you have to know like the curriculum and um there's so many different factors because they're also different. And a CPS classroom differs a lot from the, like nonprofits or private centers. So I visited a lot of classrooms and I saw how the quality varied so much. Um, the resources that centers may or may not have, and um, just like how the children were being interacted with, how they were being challenged, or what they were doing. It just varies so much.
Did it vary from class to class or from school to school? Like, did you realize this when you were in college and visiting different classrooms?
Yeah, so I first noticed it in college, and I noticed the difference also in classrooms. Um, some teachers were like, "Hey, just getting by." The children were like just running around the classroom, and other teachers had like great classroom management, but there was still like not a lot of engaging with the children. So it varied so much. Um, and then after college, when I visited classrooms or in centers for work, that's also when I noticed like the difference in centers, how they were managed. It's just you don't know, and it's like we do have someone that's overseeing everything, but it's pretty much up to each center to decide what curriculum they use and how their discipline policy looks like. So, um, after seeing all of this, I that's when I decided to return to school and focus on early childhood education, primarily management. for some reason I started working in management very early on. So I've been a manager like most of my adulthood. Um, so I obtained my master's in early childhood administration. And um, since I'm not an educator, like I don't consider myself an educator, but I consider myself like an early childhood professional. So like my area of expertise is managing programs, especially education and youth programs. Um, so I wanted to work in the classroom in order for myself, I feel like to understand how um, to manage in an early childhood center the best way that I could. So I worked in a Montessori preschool for like, let's say almost 2 years. And it was very life changing for me to have been a part of that. Because I like I never really saw myself working in a Montessori center, and the fact that it happened, I feel like like it led me to exactly what I wanted because I already saw all the gaps that there were in all the early childhood centers that I have visited. And once I was there, I was like, this is amazing. Um, every child should have this type of center. So being there was just so eye opening from day one. From my interview, I was like, this is the quietest center I have ever been in. The interview was in a classroom, and the two classrooms were open, so they shared one large space. It was on one side of the room, and there were children there. They would peek in and look at us, but it wasn't like loud. It wasn't like the children were engaged. They were doing stuff, but it wasn't like, oh my God, what's happening here? And I was just like from day one, it was like, oh my God, what is this? I want to be a part of this. Um, so I was in the classroom. I was a teacher assistant in the classroom, and I learned so much, like so much. Yeah, you go to college, you go to school, and you learn about the philosophy of education, and you learn about all these different theories. But I don't believe that if I had been in any other type of setting, I would have learned as much as I did there. Um, and I was like, I already had it like in my brain. I'm like, I'm going to open my own place one day. So I learned so much and I took it with me. Um, so yeah, so every child should have a Montessori school, but also something that we um, don't, well, we know here in the United States is that Montessori education is only accessible to very few children and children that only come from certain backgrounds, whose parents can afford to pay for Montessori schools. I mean, if you look at the tuition for most Montessori schools, they're even higher than some college tuition. Um, so it's like, how could that ever be affordable? And I had a child myself then that was, she was like 3 or 4. She's 10 now, so it's like it's been a long process. And I'm like, I wish I could, give her. She would have had this opportunity. Like, there's no way, like, for most people to be able to afford this. Um, so I was like, then I had my son, and that's when I started planning to open my own center. Actually, right after he was born, and he's 5 now. So it's been a 5-year process already. From looking for the right building, um, trying to find the space. I already knew like what neighborhood I wanted. I definitely wanted to be in the southwest side because I wanted the children in the community to benefit from this. I definitely didn't want to take my Montessori school to another community. Um, so yeah, just finding the building, finding the space, but um, it's been a really long journey. Um, I've had the space for 3 years now. So I've been leasing this building for 3 years. It took over 2 years to obtain the city building permit. So the city like does not work with you. It doesn't matter what that you're opening a center for children in your community. It takes forever. 2 years, more than 2 years. And then so I received the building permit in the middle of the pandemic where there's a shortage of materials, there's a shortage of labor, everything, like the price for everything has increased. So that's what's been happening for over the past year, trying to get the building ready. We're finally almost done. Like the inside of the building has been demolished for so long that I only imagined it as a gray space. And we finally have walls up, so it's like, oh my god, it's so much lighter. And it's like, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel finally. But yeah, so we're getting close to opening, and I'm really excited. I really want to make this a space that not only accessible to the community, but where families and children can learn and they can feel supported. Sometimes we think of like daycare centers or schools as just a part of the child, but they also play a role in the entire family. Um, so I want this center to be not just a preschool where children drop off their kids, but I want to provide support for the parents, for the guardians, the grandparents, the entire family. Like I basically want it to be open all day, even on weekends, and just have different like types of enrichment um, workshops or whatever. And I'm already starting, so I'm having an early childhood fair um, with workshops and activities for the children because I really want this space to be accessible to everyone. So I don't want it to just be hey, it's this is a space for the students, but also the community can join in. So I really want to change who Montessori is accessible for because it shouldn't be accessible just to a small population. But if I can even give a little bit of Montessori education to all the children, even if it's just a little teeny bit, like I'll try it. And that's also another misconception of what Montessori is. Like people think, oh, like you have to have all these expensive materials because Montessori classroom materials are very expensive. And that's not something that most families can afford.
I've heard about Montessori education, and all I know is that I was never able to afford it. Like, I would go on these websites and like click and research when my kids were younger. I also have a 10-year-old daughter, and my son is 8. So when I was looking into like kindergarten and early childhood education, I was clicking on these schools, and I was like, there's no way I can afford this. So I didn't even like dive in deeper. I had just heard that Montessori education was amazing, and like I wanted to have access to it, but I wasn't able to. So why don't you go back and like explain what Montessori learning is, especially like when you first were introduced to it. I know that you said like you had never thought that you would end up in like a Montessori setting. So like explain why that was, and um, like how the whole Montessori style of learning had shaped you to what you're doing now.
When I was getting my master's degree and like we have to like the requirement is to take an education or philosophy of education course. We had to choose a philosopher to write about, and Maria Montessori was the most popular um person that everyone wanted to write about. And her like a lot of people don't know, Maria Montessori, she was a doctor who actually decided to observe children and um, research. Basically, she just spent countless of hours observing children and testing out different materials and different ways of teaching small children. And this is how she developed the Montessori method. So it's the only scientifically developed um, form of education that exists. Um, And even though like she came up with all of this, there are some like influences of Montessori in current education, like having furniture that fits the child instead of them using adult furniture, which they used to do before. Um, so even though there's small influences, we don't see a lot how of the Montessori method in traditional education. Um, so being able to find a Montessori school in the area when they're just not accessible, they're not near us, Montessori education is just not accessible for people like me, definitely. Um, so learning about more about Maria Montessori, I I guess you understand a lot more about how easily accessible it actually is, which sounds contradictory, but like you can learn using the Montessori method at home using things that you already have. So basically, Maria Montessori's the principles that she uh, came up with were the prepared environment. That's like the number one thing that's talked about. So it's not really just about the child. Also, the child learns. We It's the child that has issues learning, but it's the entire environment. It's the person that's teaching. So she didn't call her teachers. They were guides because they guided the child. Um, so we have the prepared environment. So we have to make sure that we are providing children with the tools that they need to learn rather than just giving them a lesson and expecting them to learn from that. So we guide them. If they're not learning, it's not the child. It's either us or it's the environment. Um, she also talked about respecting the child. So that's another part. Like we listen to the child. What are they interested in? Are they really interested in planets? Do they want to learn about fish? So we definitely follow what they're learning, and we just allow the child to continue um, learning about that. Also, using like real items in the classroom as opposed to pretend. So rather, like in a traditional classroom, you have the play area, the kitchen area, and then you have the blocks and so on. In a Montessori setting, you have real kitchen tools. So the children are not just pretending, they're actually doing like cooking, and they're cutting fruit, and they're washing their dishes and everything. They can bake in the classroom. So that's the big difference.
I had no idea.
Yes.
That's
And
so
people,
interesting.
yes, and people are so shocked to see small children using knives because they're like, oh my God, it's a knife, or glass cup. So not every Montessori center uses this, but I definitely do at home. Like my son he was drinking from a glass cup before he was 1 year old, and he has never drank from plastic. So when people give him like a styrofoam cup or like a plastic cup, he doesn't know how to hold it because it's so light. I'm scared he's going to spill it, and people are scared he's going to break the glass cup, but he's never broken a glass cup before. And that's a part of also like learning through Montessori, the natural consequences. So what happens if the child drops the glass cup? They learn that it breaks. So they'll try to be more careful so that it won't break again. And that's like, we have to be also present to make sure they don't cut themselves and clean it up. But they understand glasses can be dangerous, it breaks, so we won't drop it again. Um, so it's just so many things like that where it's like they're actually learning real things. And when I was also working in the Montessori classroom, I compared um I compared a lot, like what was in the traditional classroom to the Montessori classroom. So I was in the 3 to 6 years old classroom. That's also another thing in the Montessori classroom, which they go by 3 year cycles. So the children, it's beneficial to the children to learn from each other. So the older children become kind of like leaders or mentors to the smaller children. And then the smaller children, they learn by um, watching the older children and what they're doing. So I would definitely compare traditional classrooms to Montessori classrooms, also in the terms of what the children were learning. And I was like, this is these children, like by the time they hit the third year, they're already um they're already like learning multiplication and division. They understand like knowing your place in the world and understanding the like being knowledgeable in the whole world is also important in a Montessori education. So these children, like, they know the continents, they know the different countries within the continent. Like they don't just know that they live in Chicago or whatnot. And I used to compare it to my daughter. Like she didn't have like a real geography class until she was like in second or third grade. And then they started learning about Chicago first rather than learning about the rest of the world, which I feel like it's really like egocentric to like focus on yourself rather than the entire world. And that's something also like goes into the Montessori education. Working together, knowing that you're not just it's the world's not just about you, but that you're a small part of the rest of the world. So definitely culture plays a part in the Montessori education. Um, and just a peaceful environment. So the respect for the child, and we show the respect to the child by not yelling at them across the room. So definitely, as the adult in the room, you are not the the main, like the main person. The attention's not on you, but each child has their, each child has their time. Because the children are not learning group lessons. Each child is working at what they're able to work on. So there's no comparison as this child is behind because they haven't reached this activity yet or they're not doing this yet. It's, every child, some child may have grasped some skills that other children may not, but everyone's learning what they're capable of at their own time. So it's not a competition. It's not like my child's behind. Oh no, like what do I do? Every child is going to get there. Like it's not like a child is not going to learn. They all get there in their own way. Um, what else? Oh, I was starting about to talk about culture. So definitely, culture is very important in Montessori school. So learning about different cultures is very important. And since we use real things, we can easily adapt our cultures to the classroom. So I something that kind of not bothers me, but I feel like the Montessori classrooms, because they're very general American here in the United States, the type of materials we use are just like glass, wood, and so on, and then some types of like different ceramics that have patterns that are not necessarily reflective of our culture. So that's one way that we can incorporate that. I plan to incorporate that in my classroom, and that can be incorporated at home. Is using our actual like items from our own culture. So like the mugs from Mexico, or like I plan to use a small like tortilla machine so that children can make tortillas in the classroom, like things like that. And yeah, so it's like it's so easy to incorporate all of this in the classroom. So you don't need a lot of money to practice Montessori at home. You do need a lot of money to open a Montessori center though.
Yeah, I think like I love hearing your story and how your experience when you were in early childhood education yourself um, were shamed for speaking Spanish, or like you weren't allowed to celebrate your culture um, in your school, which, I mean, I feel like I had a similar experience. I also was in like elementary school, middle school in the 90s, and that was like the norm. Like it was the norm to just have everyone assimilate to American culture to make it easier for the teachers, and you just had to pay attention, don't disrupt, just go through the motions, get good grades so you can move on. And it was very like systematic. Um, but I definitely see a shift in um, education today. Like people are being like more aware. They're trying to be mindful of different cultures in their students. Um, so I love how your experience has given you the passion to provide a space for kids to be who they are, to celebrate their culture, their Latinidad, so that way they don't have to feel the feelings that you felt when you were younger. Because I mean, if you go like through your formative years of education being told that you should like quiet who you are, and then like you said you were in a different environment for high school where it was celebrated, like that can be a culture shock. Like how did you reconcile with that internally?
It yeah, it definitely was a culture shock. I still remember, like, I was like, well, like, we can actually like be ourselves, like authentically ourselves. I think it took a really long time. Like I did a lot of like exploration on my own. Like I learned more about like history. Like I was really into the Chicano movement. I like researched so much, and thankfully the internet like became more like like faster during this time because that's where I got a lot of my information. Like without the internet, I don't know if I would have been able to learn about the Chicano movement because there was no one talking about it. Um, so yeah, I think it definitely took a really long time to just go through all of that, and then going to college also is like another culture shock. So definitely, I think psychology helped me a lot. Like I said, a lot of the research that I did in psychology was on acculturation, and like basically all the research comes to the same conclusion that for especially for Latino immigrant or children of um being acculturated as opposed to assimilated actually is a better result in better outcomes. So having a good balance of your home culture and balancing it with the culture that's outside, um it's a lot better mentally, like educationally, everything. It's just better outcomes as opposed to completely assimilating. So yeah, it took a long time to come to those terms.
Yeah, I've never heard the word acculturated. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to like dive deeper into the that meaning and what how I can resonate with that or how it resonates in my life. Um,
Yeah, I think that helped me understand. Yeah, there's a lot more to the acculturation. Like there's like stages of acculturation. So like where you are, like you can be completely marginalized, where you are like still in your own home culture and never you can't find the balance. So that's also damaging. But I think that would be more appropriate to the actual like the person immigrating rather than the children of immigrants.
okay. Um, so you said that you are like so close to finally being able to provide this space to the community. Um, so where are you in that process? Like how like you're you're not ready to officially open for this school year, but can you see like maybe next school year?
So because um I'm going to be licensed by the Department of Children and Family Services through the state. So since I'm only serving younger children, I can open when at any time. So that kind of helps. Unfortunately, there's like no timeline for anything. So it's like whenever the different departments get back to you. So right now, the inside of the building is being finished. Hopefully, it's done in the next few weeks. And then after that, so I still have to have a final city inspection where they approve all of the work that was done. Once I have the city license, that's what's pending right now, um, then I can apply to DCFS for the state license, and that's the only way I can open until I have the state license. So I'm hoping it doesn't take too long, and I can open this fall. Ideally it would have been great to be open by September, but it's not happening. Yeah, so that's where I am at right now. I'm still fundraising. So something else like to mention is like I've been fundraising for the last year to fund this building because it just grew and grew, and it became a lot more than what I ever anticipated. So I started last May, I started making cloth masks, face masks with my mom. She's a seamstress, so she taught me how to sew. So we were sewing. We sold a ton of masks. I was like, oh, we set up in the school parking lot and just started selling to people that came. So yeah, we were popular, and then I was like, you know what? Let's invest this money that we're getting from the face mask into huaraches. 'Cause I love huaraches. So like I that's all I wear all summer, huaraches. I'm like, let's invest it and start selling some huaraches. See if we can get more money for the school. So we did, and it just started growing, and people knew that we were there selling huaraches. So yeah, I became La Casa Calderon, and Calderon is my mom's last name, and it just goes back to like her grandfather and the connection that we still have, even though I never met him. Like I know about him, I feel like I knew him. Um, and I think that's just where like our whole passion for education comes from. I come from a lot of educators in my family, so yeah, so La Casa Calderon is like an ode to my great grandfather, and um, I've been selling not just what I did, but I've also added leather handbags and just clothing and different stuff to so I can raise more money for the school. I also still need to build a playground, and I'm like, I ideally I would love to have like a natural playground, but I don't think it's in my budget this year. So I think I'm just going to do like a small playground, and then hopefully next year I'll have more funds and I can actually give the children a playground that they deserve, because we also don't have a lot of green spaces here in Chicago. Um, and even though we have like forest preserves, there's still a disconnect between who uses the forest preserves and who doesn't. So I would love to have a space, and also like nature playgrounds are popping up all over Chicago. There's some nearby. So I'm like, hey, if I could have one, that would be great because we need one. Um, but yeah, I just want to give the children like the most authentic, holistic education that they can get, and that way, my my belief is that you don't have to leave your neighborhood to get the best quality education. That you should be able to get that within your own neighborhood. Like there's no reason for people, um, especially small children, to be commuting to like 30 minutes or more to get the quality of education that they don't have in their own community.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited for you. I can you remind me where you're planning to build, or where the school home base is going to be? I want to, for listeners that are not in Chicago, I want to be able to paint a picture of like where the location is going to be.
So the building is located in Brighton Park. It's right on 47th and Maplewood. And it's actually like in the corner of where the Brighton Park neighborhood kind of ends, and then it borders Gage Park and back of the yard. And I was really like mindful of where I opened. I really wanted to have this be accessible to communities that don't have um these spaces. Even daycare centers. There's only one other daycare center on 47th Street, from like probably like Damon to like past Pulaski. It's like this huge um like part of the city that doesn't have any daycare centers.
Yeah, so I know a lot of the guests that I interviewed, or a handful of the guests that I interviewed, are were from the Pilsen area, which is a predominantly Latino community, and Brighton Park is a little bit southwest of the Pilsen area. It is also south of Little Village, which was also mentioned, another predominantly Latinx community. So to paint the picture, like this is going to be in a community that will celebrate like the Latinx culture. The school is going to be celebrating Latinidad in the community, um, which is exciting. Like to have the access to this type of environment And like you said, you wanted to open it up for not just like the school hours, but to open it up for the whole community to have more resources poured into the community. And like, I think that is huge. Um, and I know that you've talked about what brought you there, but in your opinion, like, why is this so important for this community, your community?
I think it definitely brings a different perspective also on education and what education can look like. Actually, recently I had a conversation with other moms, um, immigrant moms, and second generation like myself. So, and we talked about how like we don't have a common vision in um, in in advocating for our children's education, and not saying that not all parents are want the best education, but that there is a difference between parents that immigrated and they want a safe space, a clean school for their children, something that maybe they didn't have, and for parents that are not aware that they have those rights, or that that there are other options, or even if parents did grow up in the United States, um, they also may not be aware that these type of schools exist and that it can be accessible to their child. Like, so I think it's important definitely to change perspective. And also, like you said, there's a switch in how we are viewing parenting, how we're viewing education. And um, we understand more, like, like if you follow Latinx parenting, you know, and and chancla culture, it's everything just kind of ties in together. Definitely, Montessori is a very positive type of environment, and they follow a lot of like the positive discipline practices. So definitely being able to show parents that maybe like we have to like you said, assimilate. We have to follow what is being done in this country for our children to be successful. But I feel like a Montessori school can show a lot of parents that you can be yourself, you can be in your culture, and that's still going to give you the tools, or give your child the tools that they need to be successful. Like, you don't have to change who you are, your family. You don't have to change the way you learn to be a successful person.
Uh, yes, I love that. And I'm so glad that you said that. I feel like sometimes we know it, like we have an idea, like, oh, there must be more, like, for our kids, but to have someone like say it and believe it and do something about it is so powerful. And I know that you're going to continue to grow and it's going to be um, amazing. I know that it has taken so long to get to just this point, but I want to encourage you and other people listening that yes, it takes a lot of work, but when you are rooted in like why it's important, like you just keep going. You keep going until it's accomplished and it's all going to be worth it. I'm sure that you've had many bumps along the way, but I'm so glad that you've kept going and that you're doing this. In all of my episodes, I like to uh, offer encouragement for other people listening, other the next generation, other educators in the season. So, do you have anything? I mean, what you just said, like this whole episode is full of encouragement and hope for our youth. But is there anything that you want to like send out to the listeners?
Um, yeah, so definitely don't question yourself. I feel like I did that most of my life. I questioned like um my abilities, like if like I like good enough for a lot of things. So I definitely think don't question yourself, just do it. You're capable, and I think um like we didn't talk about imposter syndrome, but I'm like very sure that I suffered from imposter syndrome for a very long time, and then it took a lot of seeing especially males, not just white males, but also other, like Latinx males, like my peers, just go for things or positions that I like thought I wasn't, um, I couldn't, like I'm not at that level. Then I would see other people just do it, and I was like, okay, what's holding me back? So just don't hold yourself back. Just go for it.
Yes. And because we're talking about education, was there one teacher or educator that gave you a piece of advice or wisdom that really impacted you?
You know what? That's funny that you asked that because I don't think there was. I really don't. And that's another reason why I'm doing this. I also grew up, I didn't have teachers that looked like me or that were like me. So I don't think I ever had that like someone just motivating me. I didn't.
Yeah, and that is even more of a reason for you to be doing what you're doing and empowering other families in your communities to step up. And hopefully, you'll inspire the kids that come through your doors as well to give back to their communities and um, be that light for someone else. Before we go, I want you to share where people can find you, website, Instagram, where they can click on the fundraiser links, share all the details, and I'll also include it at the end. But for people who are listening on the go, why don't you share where people can find you?
Yes. So if you are looking for the school, currently we only have a Facebook page, Casita Montessori. The website is in the works, but it'll be up soon. And for my fundraising business, that's La Casa Calderon. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat.
Okay, I didn't realize you were on TikTok. I'll have to follow you on there too.
Yeah, it's been a fun learning experience.
Yeah, and you'll have to send me pictures of what the space looked like. And if you have any before pictures, you can send those over. I'd love to be able to share with the viewers the process. I think I'll definitely have to have you back on maybe on an Instagram live once you open so you can share with us the good news and the process and how it's been going. But yeah, I'm so thankful that you took the time today to speak with me. I'm excited for people to um, hear your story and dream alongside with you, and maybe think about education and education access a little differently after hearing your story and then hearing what you're doing and the access that you're providing to your community. I love to help out any way I can, so we'll definitely keep in contact. But I'm so thankful for your time, and I hope that you have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll talk later. Bye.
All right, bye.
She's really working hard to open the door to the school by fundraising through her business, La Casa Calderon. So if you can, support by purchasing some products through her site. I can't wait for the day that the doors are open and the families are supported and loved through the community that Lisset is building. Okay, amigos, thank you so much for listening. There will be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot, post on Instagram, and tag at Elevating la Cultura, or send me a DM. You can also comment on this YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating la cultura. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye!